Hey guys, so I just finished filming this gold and champagne tutorial for you. I thought it was perfect for either New Year's or if you had any other holiday parties left to go to before we start into the new year. And so I used the Morphe x Jaclyn Hill palette to create this look. And if you're interested to see how I got it, then just keep watching. So getting started, I've already primed my eyes with the Bare Minerals Primetime Eyelid Primer, which is my favorite to make sure everything does not crease. So now I'm starting off with the shade Silk Cream and one of my biggest fluffy brushes from Bare Minerals, and I can look up the name for it if anybody's interested, but I don't know it just off the top of my head. It's been around for a long time. So I'm just blending that Silk Cream shade into the transition area, and then I'm going to work it down with some more rich browns. I made sure to look up the names of these colors for you guys, as I talked about in my last video with knowing the names of Morphe palettes, and if you're like me, you threw away the sheet that came with this Jaclyn Hill palette that told you your colors. Now taking the shade PUKEY, and I'm just going to blend that on with a Smashbox blender brush and just add some extra warmth. I loved this shade because it really did end up creating a lot of warmth for me in the crease area, which I thought was a good accent to the champagne that I used to carve out my crease as we went along. But I just kept blending and adding this blend. I wanted to make sure I had a pretty good color payoff. I feel like the key to making everything not look like you didn't blend or everything looking too harsh is to really pack on those initial transition shades. And with transition shades, it's kind of like the more you add, the better it looks, honestly. So now I'm going to be taking the shade Buns on the Bare Minerals blender brush, and I'm just barely popping this lower than where we put that Pukey shade, and it was just kind of a cooler tone, so I was mixing my warm and my cools, and this just added even more dimension and depth to the crease area. So just blending that back and forth with the Bare Minerals blender brush, which is my favorite blending brush, but I normally save it until I get to a semi-darker color further down into the crease area. Now taking the shade Chip, which is a beautiful, rich, warm brown, and I'm just going to begin to blend that into my crease using the Bare Minerals Smoky V brush. And you can see I'm doing this a little higher than I would normally put things in the crease, but my plan was to put the chip shade a little bit higher up so that when we go in with that champagne eyeliner to kind of carve out and make a half cut crease, you'd still be able to see the darker shades so we wouldn't lose that depth and dimension. So if you recreate this tutorial at home, really try to get your darker shade a little bit higher than you normally would, just so that it'll still be showing up when all is said and done. Now just taking that Smashbox blender brush and smoothing out all my edges. I didn't have any new product on there, but it did have some of the residual Pukey shade. Now taking the shade Queen, which is an absolutely gorgeous gold. The pigmentation in this palette is excellent anyway. If you don't have it, you definitely need one. And I'm just spritzing my brush with a little bit of Fix Plus. The pigmentation is good enough. You could probably get by without it, but it's just a personal thing for me that I always like to add Fix Plus to my brush first for any kind of shimmer. I think it just makes less of a mess and there's less fallout, and why would you not want it to stand out more? So I always use a little bit. So I'm just blending that Queen shade on and setting up the rest of the base so where we can go in and carve out our eye in just a second. But I'm just putting that all over the entire lid all the way to the outer corner. And I'm using the Anastasia brush that I always use to pack shimmer that came in the Modern Renaissance, or the brush comes in any Anastasia palette that you buy generally. So I'm just continuing to pack all that on back and forth. And so once I got that to my liking, then I took the shade Central Park And I just use that to deepen up the very outer edge with the same brush that I was using to pack the shimmer on. So I'm just taking the fluffy end of that brush and just putting just the tiniest bit, because whenever we go in with the champagne liner, it really lightened up the inner corner a lot. So I wanted to make sure, for the same reason that I kept the dark brown a little higher, that we weren't losing all the depth we had created in any of the darkness on the outer corner, because you really need that to help draw your eye outward. So I'm just blending a little bit of that on, though. I don't have a lot on the brush, but just taking a tiny bit and making sure that I draw my eye out and kind of set up the basis for where we're going to place our wing. Now taking the Bare Minerals Creamy Corrective Concealer in the shade Light 2. And this brush I'm using is actually a Bare Minerals lip brush, but it was just the perfect size, so that's why I used it. And I'm just carving out in the crease, and I just did halfway over. And now I'm taking the Bare Minerals liner in the shade 5 a.m., I think, but it's all listed down below. And so I'm just putting that into the inner half of my eye, and I'm just blending that back and forth. And I'm going to speed it along because I really packed this on for a while, but I wanted to make sure it was really showing up, and this champagne color is so light that you kind of have to build it. But these eyeliners are extremely creamy, and so it did work really well. The trick is to just put that concealer down first. So I'm just going back and forth. And this stayed all night. It never creased or anything. So I definitely think the round the clock liner is the way to go if you're going to try this look. So I'm just taking that same brush from Anastasia and blending in my shimmer anywhere I might have gone too far. And then using the other end as well, where we just added that darker shade, and blending up top to make sure that I didn't go too far. Now I'm taking the Round the Clock liner in 3 p.m. and I'm going to put that into my waterline. This is the same liner as the one we used for our cut crease. This one's just a bronze shade. And for my eye color, it's one of my all-time favorites into the waterline because it just really complements, and it's actually pretty much the same color as my eyes, so I always think it goes really well. Now taking the shade Mocha, which is slightly softer than the brown that we put in our crease initially, and the Bare Minerals Precision Eye Brush, and I'm just going to be blending that onto my lower lash line. It was also a pretty close match to the eyeliner that I had in my waterline, so I thought it all went pretty good. And I never like to do the bottom lash line with as dark of a shade as I use on the top, just because I feel like it gets a little darker than it on the bottom than it will on the top. So I normally try to go a shade lighter. Then taking that same PUKEY shade that we used for our transition area up top, and the same Smashbox brush we've been using with that all along, and I just used that to kind of soften it up and blend everything out. And I'm blending it all the way out to the edge so that the top and the bottom will connect where one stopped and started. And I ended up with a little bit of that liner in my eye, so I'm just retrieving it. So now I'm taking the shade Beam, which is absolutely gorgeous. I contemplated using it for my highlight shade and then just couldn't decide. But I'm taking that on the lid line and crease brush from Bare Minerals and popping that into my inner corner and underneath my brow bone. It's honestly probably one of the best highlighting shades for me for the brow bone because I'm so fair. A lot of times they don't show up, and this one really does, which is nice. Now taking the Precision Eye Brush, I didn't add any new product, so it just has what we used on the lower lash line, but I just felt like I needed to deepen it up right above where we put the liner a little bit more, and since this was a lighter shade, I didn't really have to worry about it messing anything up, but it just added anything we might have lost when we added the liner. Now taking the Bare Minerals Lash Domination ink liner, and I'm going to be making a wing. And you can see it took me several passes. I really need to get a new one of these pens. Mine is starting to give out on me, but this is still my all-time favorite if you're going to wing. There's nothing that really beats this liner because it's so simple in the pen form. And I've had other pens in the past that I don't feel that I liked as much, but this one has such a tiny little tip, you can make the perfect wing every time. I used gel before. I used the Maybelline Gel Studio, whatever it is that most YouTubers use. I used that for years before I switched to this one, and this one has definitely been my favorite out of all of them. But it did take me some work today because my pen is not as strong as it was initially. So now taking the Expert Shadow and Liner brush and the angled end on this, and I'm going to be using the shade Abyss. As you know, if you've watched my channel before, I always like to go in with a black shade and just hit right at the lash line, anywhere that I feel like the liner might have a gap, because we all get that line between our lashes and where we placed our liner. It's inevitable, but I just like to fill that in before I ever try to complete the look. Now taking the Bare Minerals blush and contour brush, and I'm just sweeping any fallout. It was actually pretty minimal, so I was impressed with this palette. I've only used it a couple times, so I was pretty impressed with the amount of pigmentation it had, but very minimal fallout. Now taking my Lash Domination mascara and a lash curler, I just sped through that. And same for lashes, I'm popping on a pair of false lashes. And so that completed the eye part of this tutorial. And so moving on to the face, as I already mentioned, I had contoured already. So I'm taking the Anastasia Glow Kit, and this is the Sun Dipped Glow Kit in the shade Summer, which is one of my all-time favorite shades. I have most all of the Anastasia Glow Kit palettes, and this one is probably my favorite out of, other than maybe some of the ones out of Nicole Guerrero, but this one's so light and beautiful that it actually shows up on my fair skin. And I've switched up my highlighting routine a little bit. I used to do the center of my forehead and all over my nose, and now I just don't like it like that as much as I did before. So I'll do my cheekbones and then hit right above the arch of my brow. And I did my Cupid's bow as well. But then I have switched to the tiniest little Bare Minerals brush, which you'll see in a second, that I use to highlight my nose so that it's not all over. And I've switched to highlighting the bridge of my nose as opposed to the tip like I used to do before. So I'm just blending that on and hitting the arch of the brow, as you can see. And now that's the little brush that I've been liking for my nose. And so I just do a little tiny bit down the bridge. And then I like to go back once I get that on, which you'll see in a minute, and use that same dual finish blush and contour brush that I always contour with and that I swept my fallout away with. And I'll use it on the darker half that I used for the contouring shades. And I'll just kind of sweep it out so that nothing is too harsh. And it kind of just helps to clean up the edges so it's real nice and smooth wherever you placed your highlight. And so that completes the face. And then I moved on to lips. So taking the Bare Minerals Gen Nude Lip Liner in the shade Freestyle. These are my favorite lip liners because they sharpen, and I don't know about you guys, but I always end up having too much pressure and breaking the ones that roll up. So I really like these ones that sharpen better because you can keep them a little dull, which I think always works better. But that was a long process, so I just sped it up a little bit. And I'm taking the Bare Minerals Buttercream Lip Gloss in the shade Tantalize, which is probably my favorite out of all the buttercream glosses from Bare Minerals I have. It's just an absolutely gorgeous color, and I thought it really complemented the warm shades we had used in our transition. But anyhow, that will complete this tutorial, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so you'll get updates whenever I post a video. Thanks for watching. Bye.